got a mouthful of fucking pizza right now. Like, we were on deployment, and, like, they're like, hey, steak and fucking lobster, or, here's a hot meal or whatever. You always get some bad fucking news. Am I right?
Absolutely. That's when we found out that we got our deployment extended by 3 months.
It's always an extension, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's never like, here's steak and lobster and beer, and oh, by the way, you're going home early.
Mm-mm.
No.
Absolutely not.
No, it's the only time you go home early. It was like, oh yeah, like if you're in the Arctic Circle for another day, you get like the Arctic campaign ribbon. Oh no, we're going home a day early. Like, or like, hey, like the cheerleaders are coming out or something. Like, oh no, you're going home a day early.
Never. People cringe when you get the steak and lobster announcement on the plan of the day, for sure. Welcome
to the smoke pit.
Hey.
So our guest today, Leslie, she's a Navy veteran and the founder of Climb 4, a nonprofit that does a lot of spectacular things. So Leslie, you mind if I ask you a personal question?
Sure.
Did you let all the other girls in your section know that they were ugly compared to you, or were you like gracious and like benevolent about it and just like allowed them to exist in their denial?
So, funny story about my first command. I got stationed in Hawaii. My uncle got me the orders. He did 27 years in the Navy, and before he got out, that was his kind of gift to me. Asked me where I wanted to go, and I said Hawaii. And what he didn't tell me was that he had gotten me onto a guided missile cruiser that was newly integrated, meaning that females had just gotten placed on board.
Oh boy!
Previously an all-male ship. So when I got on board, I very quickly realized that I was one of a handful of women on that ship out of 400 sailors, give or take. And it was pretty interesting that one of them showed me down to the berthing area where I'd be sleeping. It was a 50-man berthing.
Oh, go on. It's just got interesting.
And where you would see, where a normal sailor would go down to a berthing and see a bunch of, people getting dressed or, whatever the case may be. I went down to an empty berthing, essentially, where all of the mattresses were triced up, meaning they had not been used or occupied. Out of a 50-man berthing, there were only 3 used mattresses or made mattresses, and I asked where all the females were, and they told me that we were it, and it was me, an IT-2, who seemed to be of Russian descent. And
because we mentioned on a previous episode with my my escapades in Russia that Russian women are either a 1 or a 10.
Yeah.
When they're no exceptions.
Right.
Either a supermodel or a henchman.
Right. Henchman. So so there was that, and then there was I want to say she was a CTR, and she was an embarrassingly overweight individual. So to even imply that I would need to bring attention to that fact was it's just not even necessary.
Wow. Like, I was expecting like a humble response, like, oh no, they were pretty in their own way, or there's some good lookers. They're like, no, one straight up looked like she hopped out of a basket of radishes with a submachine gun, and the other was just a huge lunchbox.
It's basically what I walked into. I was just as unprepared for it as they were for me, I'm sure.
Oh, man. So, like, if you're not familiar with it, a lunchbox is a term for fat people. I often refer to myself as if I'd had my third slice of pizza, a block-like object that is filled with food. So if you think of, like, a lunchbox that you had growing up. So if your friends don't know what that is, just call them a lunchbox and refuse to tell them what it is until they listen to the podcast. We'd really appreciate that.
Send them on over to the podcast.
So you were in the Navy and you were in damage control.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. I was a damage controlman. I was in charge of maintaining and repairing firefighting equipment throughout the ship. So that be your SCBAs, the gear that you put on to breathe fresh air.
So if there's like a big ass fire on the ship, it was your section's responsibility to put it out.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And did you ever have to fight a big ass fire?
I did have to fight a fire. And
now, on the size of asses, like one being like a small Russian ballerina ass, and then like a 7 being mine, and then like a 10 being a Kardashian ass. How big ass was this fire?
It was a multi-$1,000 fire for sure.
I don't know how to compare that. Is my ass worth multi-thousands, or I mean,
It's worth more than that, so I guess not substantial.
And so, the first time you stared down those flames, like what was the first thing that went through your head?
I was basically kind of shell shocked. I was really scared, and I basically just followed the leader. The leader being my first class, who was in charge of our entire damage control.
Was his
shop.
nickname Bull, like Kurt Russell in Backdraft?
No,
It should have been.
no, he was this super funny Hawaiian guy. Always listened to like island reggae and
But then he goes over and just like
super
stomps
chill.
out fires
Yes,
and stuff. That's
and when it
awesome.
came down to it, he was like shoving people out of the way and yelling, and I was like, where did this come from? He was listening to like, a song about pineapples and ukuleles like 3 seconds ago, and now he's
Just like running
hella
the show.
fury.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, taking your experience in the Navy, how did you translate that into your desire to do a nonprofit?
My desire to start a nonprofit started after the military, when I kind of decided that we weren't given enough information before we got out, for one, and we weren't given enough support when we got out, regardless of how much information that we had before we got out of the Navy. I'm sure, I don't know what the Marine Corps takes you through, if it's TAPS class or...
Absolute garbage.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So just like the Navy, even if you felt that you somehow benefited from that week-long class where they teach you how to write a resume and convert all of your Navy skills to
Convenient PDFs that your future employers will ignore.
exactly. Once if you've decided that is something that you benefited from, and then you go out into the world and you realize you are less prepared than you thought you were, and then on top of that, it's very, very hard to find the people that are willing to help you, because there's not enough advertisement toward it. So
Yeah, and so meat and potatoes down to it. We talked a little about it earlier, how you'd gotten out of the military, and like things weren't going the way that you expected,
Right.
and you were kind of bouncing from job to job,
Right.
and then so you found yourself at this point where you just said, fuck it, I am just going to go get lost in the woods for a prolonged period of time.
right, yeah. So
And so you went and you did that, and so you kind of identified like the need to be properly equipped for that. As you were saying, like how you need to be properly equipped when you get out of the military, have the information and the tools at hand. Just like when you're hiking any substantial trail, you need the proper equipment.
exactly, absolutely, and that's kind of how it snowballed into effect. All of my gear when I went hiking, or when I was preparing for that hike, all that gear was donated to me by friends who were in the military who was issued that gear. So
would you say it was quite the journey?
it was.
And so then from once you started to prepare for this, we talked about that you had a little bit of tragedy along the way, and that kind of really shaped the mission of the company moving forward.
Right. So I had a very good friend of mine. She was in my damage control division on my last ship that I was stationed on in
So
San
she wasn't
Diego.
one of the ugly ones?
No, this was the second ship, and we had plenty of pretty females on board that one.
Beautiful human being.
I don't know how they choose them. Yeah, and she was gorgeous, actually. She was beautiful. And she committed suicide while I was back home dehydrating food for the trail. And not to say that I thought that Candace would have benefited from a 6-month-long backpacking trip, but I'm not saying that she couldn't have either.
Yeah.
So what my belief is, there are never too many ways to help a veteran. Where some veterans might benefit from shooting a gun at a range, or going to therapy, or participating in dance self-expression.
Oh yeah.
There are so many outlets that should be available to veterans. specifically veterans, just because we are a different breed of human. I feel like there's only so much that a civilian will get when it comes to like military hardships.
Yeah, totally understand. And so when you were forming the name, we spoke a little bit about how originally that it was Climb for Candace.
It was.
And then your marketing team made the decision to just change it to Climb For, so that way when people were expressing their stories in conjunction with your company, they were able to input the name of their loved one. So it wasn't it's not just solely about one person. The idea that one person's loss can lead to the salvation of many is kind of seemed like where that came from.
Absolutely.
And
extremely important.
That's fantastic. And so if you had to boil it down, what would you say the biggest thing that you do to contribute to this problem would be?
I would just say we're another outreached hand to grab for.
Yeah, I get that, because there might be plenty of options out there, but like you said, we're veterans, and if you reach out to one organization and you don't get the warm and fuzzy, or maybe it's not the right time in life, or their budget, or somebody rubs you the wrong way, or we're all human, like somebody forgets to reply to an email, or fat fingers a number and it goes to the wrong inbox, people will kind of get miffed by that.
Right.
And so having another option that they can land onto is just another lifeline, really.
Exactly.
Because the idea that the problem that veterans have with stress and suicide, and not just veterans, because you're in damage control, so you have like firefighters and police officers and construction workers and oil rig workers who go through tragedy and such. And although I am not a professional firefighter, I would think that there is not a case where another hose on a large fire could really hurt.
Right. Exactly.
I'm sure some fucking nerd is probably listening, like, well, actually, according to this theory, like.
I was gonna say that was the perfect example. That was perfect.
No, because EP Mike made me watch this documentary. It's boring as fuck, about this big ass fire that happened on a ship, and they were saying that they were using like the wrong thing. Like they were supposed to be using foam, but they were using water, so it was actually washing away the foam.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I guess that would kind of speak to the fact that you have so many organizations out there that may have good initiative but bad judgment, and so what they may be doing may actually kind of be contributing to the problem, because they might be taking away from organizations that are having minimal impact. So if you had to say, what is the biggest thing that sets your organization apart?
I would say the biggest thing that sets us apart is the fact that there is not really anything else like us as far as nonprofits go for veterans getting gear. I think currently there are 2 other organizations out there that coordinate group hiking trips, which is fantastic. But I actually I hiked with one of them in a group on the PCT. They were hiking through this nonprofit, and they said the only thing that they wish that they could change about that nonprofit was the fact that they didn't necessarily get along with the group that they were placed with.
Oh, okay.
So there's a huge mentality on trail. They basically just put five Afghanistan veterans together, assuming that they would get along, and one's not an early riser, and one walks at a 2 mile an hour pace while the others walk at 4. And it's just like there are other things that have to go into play for this all to work out. And
yeah, I get that.
I think that my idea for nonprofit is that we're giving you the gear. You get to choose everything else. You get to choose who you hike with. You get to choose when you wake up. You get to choose your resupply stations. You get to choose what trail angel you come in contact with. Everything is your choice. We just got to get you out there.
Wait, did you say trail angel?
Yes.
What's that? I'm very interested in that.
Trail angels are people that have dedicated a lot of their time to helping long-distance hikers.
Okay, so they're like guides, like almost like Sherpas?
Right, kind of like Sherpas, but they stay in their house. Their houses and their facilities are usually super close to, like, off the trail.
Yeah.
So it's just as much as, it's getting to their place, and they'll feed you, they'll let you wash your clothes, they'll let you take a shower, as opposed to paying $90 and like 10 hikers use the same shower, paying money.
Because when you said Trail Angel, I just had this idea of like co-host Mike like in like a sash and nothing else, and like being lowered from a tree. He's like, I bless you with beef jerky.
Exactly. They all were so cool in so many different ways. There's one that was called Hippie Daycare, and the entire PCT hiking season, they're dedicated to feeding us. They serve nachos and cheese, and like make nachos every single day for the hikers, and
nachos rule,
right? And they let us paint rocks, and we put these big slabs of rocks that we paint in their backyard that's covered in trees, and it's like this weird, like Alice in Wonderland looking kind of scene.
Are there pictures of that on your social media?
Absolutely.
And would you tell our listeners where they can find you on social media?
Absolutely. So it's going to be for Instagram, it's going to be at climb4_. And then on the website is www.climb-4.org, and on Facebook at Climb4.
And so if you're not immediately looking this up on social media, correct yourself. Like, seriously, guys, like, we bring these cool guests on. If you're not at least looking them up, like, it's kind of a dick move in bird culture, if you know what I mean. So definitely check them out. If I can ask you a personal question.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think Candace had reached out to the VA before?
100%.
And do you feel that they did the best they could, or do you feel that there was a lapse in the system?
It's hard to answer that question, because I have gone into the VA and I've been absolutely disgusted with the service, and I've gone into the VA and I've come out crying from how amazing the service was. It's just like any other company, I feel like, for the most part. I'll touch on that a little bit later. But up until 2017, 2018, when their veteran suicide prevention department kind of let go of their responsibilities in whatever way they did. Mm-hmm. Up until that point, I think they're just like how we are. They're adjusting to what they feel, and they can't help people that don't come in. One, they can't help people who don't come in, and you guys know as well as I do that veterans are stubborn as hell. Like, and just coming from me, just meeting you and like the 15 minutes that I've known you and been dating you seriously, I've already know that you're a pretty stubborn individual. So you wound me, madam. You wound me. We'll deeply. Talk about this in couples therapy later.
Because I went to the VA I think about a week or two ago. And, I was there to pick up antibiotics, you know how it goes. And so I was just like, well, I'm here, I might as well mosey on over to the OEF clinic.
Oh, yeah.
And they had changed it to the Transition Assistance Clinic. And I walked in, and I couldn't even recognize the place. It was just covered with, like, hey, if you're a gay or transgender veteran, like, here's all these pamphlets. Or if you're a single mother, like, here's all these pamphlets. Mm-hmm. And, like, I looked around, and it's, like, 4, like, guys who look like me, like, Caucasian-ish men, with beards.
Biracial angels.
Yeah, and I was just like, okay, well, this is kind of weird. And so I went in there, and I get it. It's important to have programs and stuff available to small demographics, because you don't want to leave anyone behind. But let's be honest, if the majority of the people who are being seen there are like, guys like me, like multiple combat tours, and we're just there because we have PTSD and stuff, like, what are you really tailoring to, Yeah. It's like the Marine Corps commercials I said a few episodes ago. Like, if you go to any straight leg infantry unit, it's going to be like 95% white dudes, mm-hmm. with a little bit of minority mixed in. But then you watch the commercials, and it's all like, minority female, minority dude, like, mm-hmm. white girl, and it's just like they pull out their swords and they
slay the dragon.
Yeah, and not even like we haven't had a good dragon slaying commercial since the 90s,
yeah.
And that was what, a white man. But yeah, so my first impression when I walked in, I was just like, obviously this isn't set up to help me. Like they had, some fucking activism group was just like, oh, you're not catering to this. So in typical government fashion, they knee-jerked and overcorrected. And so I went in there and I was like, hello, my name is Daniel Sharp. I like long walks on the beach. Being ghosted, and yeah, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But
I've been having these crazy dreams lately.
Yeah, and so I was just like, I was service connected PTSD. It's been a while since I've got some treatment. I've been struggling. Like, I'd like to set up an appointment. Those motherfuckers went like DEFCON 6.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, is 6 good or bad? I feel like Michael Scott right now. Like, DEFCON 1, is that the most important?
I feel like DEFCON 1 is the most important.
Okay, so I went DEFCON 3. Let's say that. I thought it was like a 1 to 10 scale. And so they're like, fucking nurses are like scrambling. There's paperwork being fucking thrown. Like, people are being called and paged. And like, I'm like, I just want to set a mental health appointment. Like,
Yeah.
And they're like, we'll get you in to see the trauma nurse. And like, okay, cool.
And EP Mike walks out.
Stark naked.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually kind of like pleasantly surprised that it happened like that for you.
No, but it was
for
almost
sure.
more harm than good.
Yeah, I can
Because
see that.
I walked into the triage center and they had like the provider, and the first thing she said, she's like, all right, we're gonna go ahead and commit you for about 10 to 14 days just for an evaluation. And I looked at her and I was like, lady, I will make it to that door before you can call security, and you will never see me again.
Yeah.
And she was like kind of taken aback. I was like, I came in here to set an appointment. I didn't come in here with a gun trembling in my hand. And your first reaction is to say that I need to be institutionalized for 2 weeks.
Right.
I was like, how dare you?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like if this is how you're treating other veterans, like no wonder they don't want to come back. Because
Right.
the reason I stopped seeking treatment about a year or so ago is because I walked in and within 30 seconds of talking to this provider, she was writing me a prescription for antidepressants.
Oh yeah, prescription writing was like, I mean, that's just basically how they get
Yeah.
you out the door.
Yeah, and so like my appointment was 3 minutes, and I walked out with a prescription for a few different prescriptions that take 2 to 3 weeks to even take effect.
Right, exactly.
And it's just like I just felt so belittled and like so undervalued that I didn't go back for a while. And then life happens, and I was like, all right, well, you know, let me go into the OIF OE cliff because it's supposed to be for me, you know, like all my deployments fall under OIF OEF categories. So it's like this is for me, and no, and it wasn't. And so that's the first thing they tried to do, and it was just like, all right, well, I'm gonna fill this office full of uppercut.
Yeah.
If you guys try to fucking straitjacket me, like, and they're like, okay, so like, why are you here? And I'm like, you didn't even know I was here, and the first thing you tried to do was you know, commit me? Like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
And yeah, so if you're a VA provider and the first thing you do is write a prescription or try to fucking hospitalize somebody, correct yourself.
Yeah, a similar situation sort of happened with me not too long ago. So when I, obviously in San Diego, when I was going through all of those things, drinking played a role only because of my mind, right? Like, I don't consider myself to be an alcoholic.
No one ever does.
No one. No, but when I was going through all those things,
I want that as a video clip. And this part too, where I'm saying I want it as a video clip and her reaction.
I want all of it.
Yeah, I want all
oh
of it.
my god.
I want the world, Chico, and everything in it.
Take that picture.
But yeah, so when I was going to the VA over in San Diego, I was going because my
No,
way
I
of
don't
dealing
know.
with
Please tell us.
my way of dealing with, or my coping method was by drinking. And by the time I had gotten here, and when I had gotten off the trail, I had used a couple substances, like not alcohol, that were amazing.
B12 vitamins.
B12 vitamins, 100%.
One a day
Yeah,
women's.
Yep,
Am I
yep.
right?
I won't say them.
Sport Vitapack. And
specifically, but I had somebody reach out to me the other day, and they're like, "Hey, would you like to try these psychedelic mushrooms?"
Yes!
I'm like, "Go on."
Go on.
Are you gonna do that, by the way? Are you excited?
I don't know. I would
Daniel, we're doing it.
let's at least drive out to international waters.
Yeah.
Because we're competing for a grant between $10,000 and $25,000 from a nonprofit, and I don't want to be like the face of the company who's doing psychedelic mushrooms.
Sound
Yeah, but
naked
if
in
I
the
give you,
dumpster.
if I give you chocolate for our 1 month anniversary, who are you to know?
But if I'm on psychedelic mushrooms, I'm probably gonna buy a giraffe. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like
that's
obviously a baby one.
That
so I could
rarely
fit it.
happens from
Yeah.
psychedelics. Not
Really?
yeah.
I wouldn't know.
I think it's as low as
I think he really just wants an excuse to buy a giraffe at this
0.02%
point.
of people that buy giraffes on mushrooms. But
She said she was prepared for this episode,
Yeah, she's
and I'm
prepared.
impressed.
Giraffe stats. It's hard to get.
Honestly, I'm impressed.
I'm all about the stats.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I came back. I came to Virginia, and by this point, I think obviously I'm still drinking, but it's definitely not an issue anymore. Like, I'd much rather stay home. Like, I have better coping methods. I hike. I have 2 dogs. I have this nonprofit to kind of funnel my attention into, which has been super helpful. And I went in to just kind of get checked in because this was a new VA, this was a new state. I didn't know how to even transfer my my stuff over from California to here, so I was just going in. I was really just going in just to get checked in, you know, just to say, hey, I'm now living here. I'm no longer living in California, and I just need to know what to do. And also, I think I'm a little bit depressed, and I have like some anxiety, and the anxiety was building because of me starting this nonprofit. So I was like, I think I need to get on some, you know, either some anxiety meds or, you know, or just talk to a therapist and see how I can better, you know, cope with this anxiety that I have. And they're like, yeah, just 1 second, we'll send you over to this window and we'll get you looked at. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I, you know, go into this room with this doctor or nurse or not nurse, I don't know what it was, and this individual who seemed to be like adequately qualified. They started asking me a bunch of questions. They were like, you know, have you ever been arrested? Have you ever blah, 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 like going through the questionnaire of, do I have a drinking problem, blah, blah, blah. So I'm telling them, I was like, oh yeah, well, when I was in California, like I was seen because I was kind of a mess back there. And so yeah, I guess you could say that I have struggled with, you know, alcohol abuse or, you know, drug abuse, whatever you want to call it. And they're like, okay, interesting. Yeah. So we'll get you set up for an appointment to further go over this. That's going to be next month. And I was like, okay, perfect. I made sure, because I was actually going home for a few days to Louisville, Kentucky, and I was like, just make sure that it's before this date because I'll be gone for a week. And they're like, yeah, absolutely.
It took a whole month.
A whole month. It took 30 days. It was 30 days from the day that I walked in.
And so that was similar in my experience, where I still think I have like another 2 weeks before my appointment.
Right.
Like just in the meantime, I'm just like listening to Lucid Dreams and I Miss You by Blink-182
yeah,
on repeat.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so I get over there. I go to my appointment 30 days later, and I'm sitting in an office, and the woman is asking me questions. She's being very friendly and nice, and she was like, so, you know, now's where we talk about, you know, the check-in process. And I was like, the check-in process for what? And she was like, oh, for your, you know, it was like an alcohol abuse, like inpatient treatment.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, what are you talking about? Because I'm just here for anxiety. Yeah. Like, and they were like, well, it says on your, alcohol abuse. I'm like, no, this was completely misunderstood. Yeah. Yeah. And they were like, well, you're here to check in. And I was like, no, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not checking in to anything. Yeah. I leave for Kentucky in 2 days, and I'm not doing anything. So we're going to fix this right now. At this point, I'm like losing my mind. I look like an insane person at this point. They probably should have checked me in with how I responded. I know.
They work you up and they get you.
Exactly.
I think you said something that is very interesting. I think we both kind of hit on this. Where you go in there and you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know their qualifications. Not. You don't know what their degree or their training is, and you just go in there, and it's kind of like the military, where you just like put your trust in somebody. Like some fucking parachute rigger or some fucking motor T Bubba shows up, and you just have to trust that they know how the fuck to do their job. Yeah. And so you walk in the VA, and they shuffle you around like pinball, and wherever you land, you have this person who's about to make a decision that could impact the rest of your life, and you don't know what their qualifications are. What I would absolutely fucking love to do is to get EP Mike, put him in a lab coat, and have him just walk around to people at the VA with a glove being like, time for your prostate exam, and see how many people go with
them.
Just
go.
Absolutely.
And then, of course, like, if they start following him to the bathroom, we, like, run up and be like, no, you got, like this man is a deviant. And then all three of us just fight him.
Exactly.
and then our job here is done.
Yeah.
EP Mike is gone.
And then we get the medal.
And that's how you get a name.
Two sailors and a Marine beat up Army soldier trying to sexually harass and assault patients
Even
in
the
the VA.
log rider's like, what?
How can we even put this in the news?
What the fuck?
Yeah, he has the biggest smile in the world right now. Like the idea that he might get some prostate action.
Exactly. He's like, who needs a glove?
Am I right?
Yeah, so and I think that kind of speaks to the severity of the appointment to which the people who work at the VA adhere to. Mm-hmm. You have this vulnerable individual who walks in, and that's what I told the provider. I was like, look, I wasn't brought here. I walked in. I am here to set an appointment. You know, like I wasn't brought in here against my will. I'm not at risk. I'm not displaying ideations, which I was. I just wasn't going to tell her that. You know, because like I have 5 different certifications in this through the military. Like, and I told her that. I was like, I've been giving this class long enough to know that when you get to a certain point, if a student or a Marine or whoever sailor were to come up to me and express these signs and symptoms, this would be my advice. I'd be like, all right, look, what you need to do now is make sure you're safe for now, and then let's get you the next echelon of care.
Right.
And so I am bringing myself to the next echelon of care, and your first knee-jerk reaction is to go high and to the right.
Yeah.
I was like, that's going to make me never want to come back. Like, how am I telling you how to do your job?
Right.
You know? And then, but thankfully, I sometimes wish that I didn't have any attachments to this world, you know, that it'd be easier to let go. But, you know, I had to go and get a little popular. And
I know.
Exactly.
It's the worst.
yeah, my parents had to.
Famous, yeah.
Yeah, my parents had to keep fucking, and now I have these little
Right.
sisters. Yeah, because
Couldn't stop after me.
yeah, seriously, because like the last thing I would want is to get some like shitty memorial tattoo, because I killed myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you're gonna do it, at least A, you know, do it well,
Yeah.
and B, like don't use that as an excuse to go out and fucking get high and fuck dudes and
Right.
you know what I mean? Because you see people
I
like
feel like you're talking to me.
you,
I don't need an excuse. To get
you as
tattooed.
a young impressionable
Yeah,
female
that's
had an
right.
older brother kill himself, and now you just have lots of sex with dudes and do drugs.
How I cope is how I cope. How dare you?
Yeah, because like I think we, you know, for the majority of us, we've all dealt with one loss or another. You know, whether it be a family member or a friend, a coworker, somebody you went to high school with. There was a rash there for a while where EP Mike was having like somebody he went to high school with die like every week for like for a few weeks, and so you know we've all dealt with loss, but it's just the way that you cope with that, the way you choose to cope with that. Because at the end of the day, everything's a choice.
Absolutely.
And there are things that happen to you that you can't control. You can't control if you feel sad. It's a chemical reaction.
Right.
You can't control if somebody's mean to you, if somebody betrays you, whatever the case is. But what you can control is the way that you respond to these things. And so, you know, if you're listening and you're going through something hard, ease up on the alcohol a little bit. Believe me, that's the best advice you're probably going to
Best
get.
advice.
And also to go with that, reach out to somebody. Because, yeah, you might go there and you might get offended by the way you're treated. You may not feel that you're, you know, treated the right way. But at the very least, just the action of taking yourself to get hope shows you that you're not willing to give up on yourself.
That's right.
Fight for yourself as hard as you would fight for somebody else.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So if you feel that that there is anything that the VA could do better as a whole, how would you summarize that in like a sentence or two?
Oh, well, I don't know if you guys had read the articles that came out, I don't know, like a few months ago, based off of the
Bold of you to assume we can read.
Oh, no.
Have you not?
Oh, no.
Not the audience.
Yeah, have you not seen the people sitting next to you?
Is the VA comic book out?
Let me just explain. Do you guys have a pen and paper? I'll just make drawings. Oof. But yeah, so 2018, the VA kind of dropped the ball on their
Wait, 2018 was just like a few months ago.
Yeah, so for the entire year of 2018, they dropped the ball. So, it was noted that there was about $6.2 million worth of funds to go specifically towards veteran suicide prevention. Do you guys want to guess how much they had used by September?
I'm going to say about $1.58 million.
I'm gonna guess just over $2 million.
Okay. It was actually $57,000.
What?
Jesus Christ.
I mean, I feel like, hey, listen up, VA. Like, we're going to have the secretary of the VA at the next Burbis.
We are, yeah.
So I'm going to go up and be like, hey, you should spend this other $5.5 million sponsoring the Smoke Pit.
Right, no shit.
Absolutely.
And we'll turn it into an entire activism platform.
Yeah.
The podcast is just singing the laurels of the VA and how you should get help.
Right.
I mean, we practically do that anyway, so maybe
Yeah.
we should at least get $5.5 million for it.
But it's less than one. That's 1%. It's
Yeah.
less than, if you think about it, less than 1% of the funds that they had to use for veteran suicide prevention.
I'm calling malarkey. I'm gonna bust out the calculator.
Yeah, let's try it out. I hope I'm right.
You're gonna test his math for Marines on his own show.
All right. So what was the budget?
6.2 million.
6.2. I actually put a period in there
I
instead
know.
of comma.
Oh my god.
All right. So
I feel like she's gonna be right.
divided by 100 is. I was wrong.
Oh wow.
1% is 62,000, so less than 1%.
Way less
Yeah.
than 1%.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
I forgot there was such a thing as 500,000. which would have been 10%. But
Right.
yeah, you heard it here, folks. In our first couples argument, I was wrong, and she was right.
Wow.
You will
that's
make
healthy.
up for this.
Ooh,
It's healthy. Ooh, oh, yeah.
speed up, gas pedal, gas pedal.
Yeah, it's kind of alarming, and it's
It's unacceptable.
oh,
really.
it's
Yeah.
absolutely unacceptable.
Ooh, perfect segue. Ghosting.
Oh, wow. We're
When
done
is it
with that?
acceptable and when it is not? Because we said we were going to talk about it.
We are. Yeah.
Yeah, but before we get into that, make sure you try Combat Comb Over Pomade.
You haven't plugged it yet. Yeah.
No, do you mind? You
Sorry,
mind?
I'm so sorry.
You mind
I'm
if
so
I fuck this
sorry.
football?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll hold the camera. You fuck this camera. Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I was saying, Combat Comb Over Pomade, available in several different scents, like I Married a Stripper, Disgruntled NCO. I think currently right now I have trace amounts of My Recruiter Lied in.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
if you're wondering how my hair is so luscious and voluminous, I haven't showered in like a week, so it's only a little bit left, so it's not greasy. That's like the perfect level of amount to be in there. But if you need a stronger hold, make sure to use as much or as little, and then you can tag your post on their Instagram, tag them on Facebook, check them out, combatcomover.com. I actually use this product, unlike when you listen to some other shows and they're like, oh, use this, and like dudes never touched it. Like I literally have 4 cans in front of me, and I actually have a 5th in the bathroom that I'm most of the way done.
But are they touched?
Well, I haven't got to it yet because I'm still using the other.
It called him out.
I was
in
actually
the
gonna
middle-
say. I was actually gonna say, wow, that's a lot of use. And he totally called
in the
himself
mid-
out.
in the middle of his
Smell
own
that,
plug.
Oh, that smells.
Speed up,
Where's,
gas pedal.
where's cocaine and hookers? Yeah, try that. Smell.
Cocaine and hookers?
Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Oh my.
Yeah.
That's not what I would expect a stripper to smell. I mean, I've been into a strip club before.
Well, it's hooker, not stripper.
Yeah,
Oh.
there's a difference.
Oh gosh,
Those of us who have been low enough know the difference.
that smells really good.
Yeah.
So
It's also not what cocaine smells like.
I don't think you can put real cocaine in this product. Just
made
throwing
with
it out
bits
there.
of real
Yeah,
cocaine.
exactly. You'll be awake for days.
So I think it's perfectly acceptable to ghost somebody if they're not wearing Combat Comb Over.
That's fair. That's fair.
So we'll send it over to Mike first. Like acceptable, not acceptable. Go.
I think my God. I think there are times when it's necessary, but I also think people don't know when they're ghosting and they need to be more cognizant of it. And that's about all I have to say. If I only have a minute to talk about it.
Go deeper.
20 seconds.
Go deeper. I feel like someone who's been ghosted on a myriad of occasions, it sucks. It is the worst feeling. But also, I can't blame these people because just through dating apps and through social media and stuff, I feel like I've ghosted people without even realizing it, and like may have crushed them or their hearts or whatever the fuck. People have feelings. So just be more cognizant of the fact that you're ghosting if you are. And if you do it just as a sport, you can go fuck yourself right now.
Fair.
Yeah.
What do you have to say?
I guess that's my cue to leave.
And she ghosts the podcast.
No, I think that's appropriate. I think we've kind of like molded ourselves as a our generation. It has become increasingly easier to avoid a situation, and it's not just with dating, it's with everything. Instead of calling and telling your boss you're sick when you're hungover, you literally just don't call your boss at all. Like it's more than that.
Your screen went out. Please edit that.
Instead of like taking your time to cook an entire meal, you're like, let's just Uber Eats and like be lazy about it. We're just lazy individuals. It's
love
not
it.
even.
You
it
guys
has
are compatible.
Oh my God, I'm gonna propose you right after this.
I'm about to say this is like a
Hottest thing
telenova,
I've ever heard.
or like I'm clearly the better option, but your
Right,
guys'
right.
damage fits better.
Oh, it does. It does.
Our,
So-
our damage totally
Control
fits.
my damage. Go ahead.
Stop. But you know what I mean? Like we've just we've kind of just like developed over time this idea that being lazy is better, and it is easier. It's always going to be easier, and I think we've taken advantage of that to the point where now like other people's feelings are involved, and we're pulling the blanket across all aspects of what ghosting could mean. You know.
I think that a big consideration of it is the history with the person and the expectations that were outlined going into it. So if you have a girl, she comes over and you're like, look, I'm not looking for anything serious, but we can spend the evening together and keep each other company. And she's like, yeah. And then like the next day, you know, she's all like up your ass and stuff. I can give her a warning, you know, be like, hey, look, we talked about this. And it also, the message that that they send will be like a big indicator whether or not I'm going to reply.
Right.
Like if she's just like, hey, like, you know, I was thinking about, you know, our children's middle name. I'm like, whoa, I pump the brakes.
Yeah.
But if she's like, hey, like I'm on the way with food and blowjobs, I'm
Yeah.
like, that girl's not getting ghosted.
Absolutely not.
Meanwhile,
absolutely.
she has a list of middle names. You know, that's usually how it works.
Which is fine, you know, because at least she's putting me in a combined arms dilemma, you know, like fixing flanking
That's
me.
right.
Like that's
Yeah.
just smart business
Yeah.
right there. But
It's
if
good
you're
strategy.
Yeah, but if you're just like annoying and needy and clingy and like you're the kind of person who always has to add something,
Sure.
you know what I mean? Like double and quadruple, triple text, like all that stuff. But like just look at it from the other person's perspective. Sometimes you will put your best effort into something and you get fucked over. But you also have to realize the fact that you didn't have to sleep with that person. You could have been like, hey, look, I'd like to date more before we get to that point. So if that's what happens, like you can't be surprised.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That you jumped into bed with somebody and it wasn't what you expected.
Right.
And that being the most important thing is like outlining expectations to begin with. Like, hey, is this just for fun or are we going somewhere with this? And then on the opposite end, if somebody is brave enough to like outline their expectations with you, like don't be a piece of shit and lie about it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Because like I found in my experience that girls are exponentially more likely to have sex with you if you tell them like, hey, look, this was what my last STD test was. This is you know what I'm expecting, and like you give them that information, allow them to make their own decision, versus just like trying to be like the cool guy who's acting like you're gonna give them the moon and the stars, and then when you fucking ghost them, they hate you.
I'm a shining knight.
That's right. No big deal. Here's my
Yeah.
horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My
So-
horse cock.
You got it. This one gets it.
So to round that out, if you haven't had an STD test in like the last 3 to 6 months, go fucking get one.
Yeah, I get it frequently. Even if I haven't
Absolutely.
sex in a long time, I still get one.
Yeah,
Legitimately.
like I said, I was at the
Absolutely.
VA the other day picking up antibiotics, you
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
so like, I'm kidding, but
He
yeah.
doesn't use
Awkward
antibiotics. Yeah.
pause.
Yeah, so that being said, that's it for us this week.